Hi, I'm Barbara Bashaw, and I'm the director of the dance education program here at NYU Steinhardt School of Education. I think dancers and choreographers have things in common with musicians and can have experiences that connect them deeply to musicians. Certainly, knowing and experiencing music is a huge part of the dance field. And personally, myself as a dancer, I tend to hear movement in the form of sound. So when I'm actually moving, when I'm dancing, it has the sensation of being a sound to me. So I can hear my phrasing inside of my body. So that to me is a really sort of a deep connection to music. And so then when we do sort of marry our art form to music, because we don't always dance with music, sometimes we dance in silence, but when we do marry it, it really becomes contrapuntal and a relationship between the music score, the musicians, if they're live musicians, and the dancers. So a lot of dancers have that sensation of being able to hear their movement. I think it goes both ways. Definitely implies movement, either in the immediate sensation of imagining yourself being the music. Sometimes you get images of people dancing, or even choreography from it. But there's just such an immediate connect sort of between, I guess because dancers live in this real kinesthetic world. To us, for example, if I hear the sound of an airplane, I get the sensation of air moving across my chest. So you can only imagine, the sensation of hearing music, what that does to your body, what that experience is like emotionally is very intense. We actually do collaborate here at NYU. We will often, our dancers will be invited to come over and perform with the musicians when they're doing some of their concerts.
We have never see that though.
Yeah.
Unless it's Ray Charles or somebody, you don't see that dancers on the stage.
Right. Yeah. I mean, one of the obvious problems is they don't make stages where you can have everybody on them, and that's a big challenge. So, where and that's, I mean, some of the challenges we have here is when we have a music concert here, we need the dancers, and the dancers are sort of stuck, in this little space, on the stage. So it's that, I think that's part of the challenge is the traditional proscenium, and I think where you do see dance and music together is when you break out of the traditional proscenium and you have you have like the cafe stuff, or you have sort of things that happen in like more in the round, and or things that are happening outdoors, or that are often connected more to cultural practice. And that's, I feel like that's definitely part of what has happened is there was a time in mankind where there wasn't all those separations, right? It was, and in a way, like I used to teach in the public schools, in the K-12 schools, and part of what they need to understand is it actually also used to be all together, and I wanted them to have the sense of being a community together who makes dance together, makes art together, because I often thought in my head, is a school a stage or is it a community? And it's a community. So I felt that we could I enjoy challenging the traditional proscenium, and finding ways to play with either the proscenium or other performance arenas so that we can keep things married in interesting ways or find new ways of doing that. But I think one of the things that happened with dance is that the advent of the proscenium, and in that advent it became sort of separated or idolized or put sort of on display. Yeah, it is good to see more, or it's good to see when it is still together, and to wonder how you can continue to challenge that or bring that together. We are a graduate program only. We have an MA, a PhD, and an EDD that's in dance education. And we are the only program in the nation that is completely based in dance education, completely dedicated and focused on dance education. So it's a program that is for dancers who teach and teachers who dance, both of those. And our curriculum continues the artistry process. We don't train dancers. You have to come trained already with a background in dance or a performance career in dance, or have embodied a cultural practice. Maybe you grew up dancing with your family or in your community. You have to come with a really strong dance experience that you bring into the program. And then once you're in the program, we continue that artistry really through developing the choreographic voice and developing voice. In conjunction with that, you're exploring pedagogy and the real direct connect that the creative process in pedagogy has to the creative process in dance. So the symbiotic relationship between creating a dance and creating teaching. There's just a really direct connection and symbiotic reciprocal experience between those two. We really like to help students blur the line between what an artist is and what a teacher is, so that they see it really, it's two sides of the same coin, or it's part of the same world. So our curriculum is based really in we have what we call 3 pillars: the creative aspect, pedagogy, and then of course research, because research in teaching and learning in dance helps us make connections to growing the field in terms of artistry and growing the field in terms of pedagogy. So students that come here really get grounded in all 3 of those areas. They continue to perform and make choreography. They go into field work, either in the K-12 schools or in the universities and colleges that are surrounding us. They student teach in those sites, and they engage in research. They really they start to develop through multiple drafts of both a piece of choreography and a written paper about what their vision is for teaching and learning and for their art. And it's out of that vision that they pull their inquiries and their questions and their curiosities, for which then they start conducting research. And by the time they leave the program, they have a really full portfolio of something that started out as a very personal investigation, but then they have all the sort of the connections of where that investigation is situated in the field of dance and in the field of education and in the larger world. So they can find out who they are and where they want to go in the future. We don't specialize at all. As a matter of fact, we like to bring in a real diversity of students that come from many different backgrounds. A really important part of our program is the community that we build together with our peers in the community. So we have students that, traditional Chinese dance, traditional Korean dance, that come with African dance, that come with modern backgrounds, ballet backgrounds, Mexico, I mean, everywhere. And hip hop, just everything you can possibly imagine. And they share that experience with each other. So we don't we don't spend our time in this program continuing to train them. We have dance classes that they take because they're investigating, they're picking apart the pedagogy that's inside of it. So they don't just sort of come in and take class. They take class, and at the same time, they deconstruct what's happening during the class so they can get a larger picture. Because in all fields in dance, we've inherited practice, teaching practice, and there's all kinds of sort of hidden and intrinsic things inside of those teaching practice. And what we do with our students is expose what that is, what's been inherited, what are the values in that, what does that mean, is this really, so do you want to make the choice to continue that, or do you want to change something? And so bringing students in with multiple backgrounds really creates a really textured community where people's values can get challenged, and people can discover new choices they want to make. People can understand their own culture and their own inheritance better. What they all do in common with their dancing is make choreography, is become choreographers if they're not already choreographing, which often a lot of people are not. We definitely have people that come into the program that are well-established choreographers who have been presenting their work on tour all over the world, but we also have a lot of people that haven't ever choreographed a dance in their life. And so the choreography becomes a container for them to play with the vocabulary that they've inherited, to play with the teaching practices that they've inherited inside of rehearsal processes, and to deconstruct in a very personal way who they are and what they believe and where they want to go as an artist, as a teacher, as a researcher. One of the things we do is expose them to a lot of choreography in their classes, and we've developed courses that actually take them out into the field too, and try to get them out there seeing the live performance that's here in the city. And it's through engagement really with seeing work that they also get ideas for their own work. So yes, in the sense that we teach, in a choreography class, you both give opportunity for intuition to work, but you also talk about compositional structure, dynamics, partnering and relationships, how you're building relationships, space, and how you're sculpting the space. Essentially the same thing as a composer, a music composer would work with, or a visual artist would work with. It's the same, the choreographers working with those same concepts. Most people that come here have already gotten a background in anatomy and physiology, and if they haven't, then we do offer that kind of coursework for people that have not done that. But that is a major component. And the field of dance today is really moving into practices that integrate body-mind, that integrate health and well-being, and that's a very important aspect that we bring into the program. A major concept that we expect our students to really understand and to practice when they leave is the idea of a student-centered teaching. And so inside of that, understanding that wellness and well-being has everything to do with anatomy and physiology, but also with psychology and emotions and affect and how people feel. So it's really those those two areas are very important to us. So we also offer coursework in dance therapy, which is with Mimi Burgo, who's one of the really most notable dance therapists in the world. And in our core curriculum, we've selected faculty who really understand what student-centered teaching is and how to balance content with student-centered work. We have the only graduate program in New York City that students can become certified with the state of New York to be K-12 dance teachers. So there's over 200 schools right here in New York City that have dance teachers in elementary, middle schools, and high schools. And there's 32 states in the nation that have dance certification. So a lot of them will go back to their state, either into a state that has it, or they'll go back and they'll really rally to bring dance into states that, into schools that don't have it. As a certified teacher, also many of them will end up working as what we call teaching artists for different venues, like there's Arts Connection, Lincoln Center, and all these places that help to get the arts into the schools where there are no certified dance, arts teachers and dance teachers. And then dance in higher education in university and college programs is another really big service area. And then there's many organizations now, almost every major dance company, New York City Ballet, American Ballet Theater, have artists who go to work in the schools or end up also teaching in higher education. So we both get students who are aiming to go into those places, or we get professional dancers who are making career transition and want to build an educational program. I would say there's sort of a relationship between intuition and real craft and skill, sort of inside and outside. And we don't emphasize one over the other. And what we try to do here is really bring both of those into the same continuum with each other. So yes, using your intuition during a choreographic process, observing giving your dancers a task and observing them and using your tuition to shape that task into something. But also being able to stand back and use real skill of how you want to construct the space and what kinds of dynamics you want to bring in or you want to change, or if you want to articulate the body in a very specific, limited way, are all part of the skill of choreography. So both of those need to inform each other, so that it's not mainly intuition, but it's also what you know about choreography and what you know about dance, that you bring into the intuitive process. I don't know that all music is intended for, certainly not all music is intended for that reason, and therefore I would say not all of it is necessarily suitable.
What makes it suitable?
I think that it depends. That depends. I think different dance artists would answer that in different ways. I don't think there's one answer. I think that typically happens, is you'll get a composer and a choreographer that collaborate together, and in that collaboration, a suitability is built. I don't know that. I've never really thought about, I want to set out to make a danceable piece. I think the obvious, or not the obvious, but I think sort of the stereotypic thing would be, oh, well, it has to have a really constant rhythm or something like that. Absolutely not. Something that's, that plays with different rhythms or goes off of a rhythm and comes back on, or is as interesting to a choreographer as something that's very rhythmical. you know, choreographers will look at a lot of things when they're reviewing a piece of music. They'll you know, some of them will just begin by you know, in an intuitive process where they'll just see what images sort of are elicited from listening to the piece, or what kinds of movement just sort of come out of the engagement with the piece. You know, they'll be interested in the dynamic of the piece, and then they might turn off the music and play with that dynamic and movement, and then bring it back and see what happens, or work contrapuntally and bring it back. They'll listen to the structure of a music composition, and then determine how they might want to structure their composition in relationship to that same compositional structure. So I think there's so many different angles, be it the actual structure, or the dynamics, or the tempo and the rhythm, or the imagery, are all ways in to a piece for a choreographer. You know, I've seen work where you can't tell if it's a musical piece, or if it's musicians who are dancing, or dancers who are working as musicians. You know, you can't, or where you can't, you know, where the lines are blurred sort of between, you know, well, what is this? You know, is it a dance? Is it a piece of music? I guess you know, people would say that it's maybe in the realm of performance art, but yeah, I guess you could say it's well-rounded in that. I mean, also the body is the instrument. You know, we don't often extend our instrument unless we're using a prop or something like that. So you're playing you know, the dancer is playing their body, and the choreographer has made decisions about how that body gets played in interaction with other dancers, in the space, in conjunction with the music. It's interesting from that perspective. But you know, dancers, you know, they have a score that the choreographer has, in a sense, composed, that they play on their instrument. And often in a piece of choreography, there's just rules for a structured improv, and then it goes back to the score again. Or pieces that are completely scored, or pieces that are just a rule for some improvisation so every time it's performed, it's slightly different. The same thing you would find in music. I mean, it's so important. It's so important. We actually have our students in an improvisation class. We require all of them to work with Douglas Dunn, who is one of the really main figures in dance and dance history of who've developed improvisational practice. Improvisation, our students often don't realize, is inherently connected to cultural practice. They don't realize a lot of our sort of American students, or you know, students who practice what we would, you know, like theatrical forms of dance, don't often realize how inherent it is and how important improvisation is in different cultural practices. And in many cases, the improvisatory practice has been divorced from certain forms of dance. So, for example, jazz dance. It's, you know, somehow it got really, you know, the improvisation of that form, and tap is another, you know, was really founded on improvisation, and it became separated, and sort of jazz got put into the dance studio, and the teacher stood in front and the students lined up, and that was it, you know. And we have a really interesting professor here, Patricia Cohen, who teaches a studio-based course, but really has the students explore the culture of jazz dance and jazz as a culture in dance, and its roots in other forms in other cultural forms. They also get, a straightforward improv class with Douglas Dunn, and I think it's so important for them to do that because we notice that they don't often know how to play. They have to learn. They have to learn how to play, and learning how to play is so important to teaching. It's so important to art making, and it's so important to research. It's like foundational to all of those. Many of our dancers come in from what we would call, have had a real history of having what we would call a skill and drill practice, and they've never improvised in their life, and they're just terrified of it. They're just absolutely terrified of it, and it takes them the whole semester to kind of figure out what's going on, and I think ultimately it helps them become okay with ambiguity, and ambiguity is such an important part of life and being able to cope in life, and it's such an inherent beautiful part of artistic practice is leaving space for ambiguity and understanding how ambiguity helps you form a work of art or helps you form your teaching, how it actually informs you in a strange way. So we just think it's so crucial. It's so crucial. We immerse them in it just right away when they get here, and they have 2 years if you're in our master's program, 1.5 years for some, 2 years, and it's really the first thing we do with them is get them playing, get them listening to their body, get them realizing that they can make their own rules, they can play with other people's rules, they can change rules, they can pick up off of other people, they can form relationships by becoming more sensitive to what other people are doing, recognize patterns. Ensemble performance absolutely demands the improvisatory sensitivity. You're not an ensemble unless you're almost in, unless your skin is almost, kinetically connected to somebody else's skin. I mean, so much of our instrument, our body is skin, and so for the dancer, our skin is like having 1,000 pairs of eyes, and improvisation and improvisatory practice is definitely about becoming sensitive in all of your skin, and that's so important to ensemble work, of being able to pick up off of somebody's kinetic energy, to pick up off of somebody's breath, to pick up something out of the corner of your eye that then you can sense through this whole side of your body, or so that's I think improvisation builds that kind of sensitivity as well. And in terms of a soloist working, improvisation would serve them differently. They may want to scat off of a phrase that they've made, so that they can engage in a conversation with the audience. So it has that sort of different quality to it, I would say. And that's ultimately what we think. I think choreography is about developing one's voice, and that where you are as an artist is going to imply where you are as a teacher, because the two are inherently connected together, and so if we can push their conceptions of artistry, we are pushing their conceptions of teaching and learning. And if we can push their conceptions of teaching and learning, it's going to impact who they are as an artist. So their first projects when they get here are developing a piece of choreography in the choreography class and simultaneously developing what we call a vision for teaching and learning in their methods class. And through asking them really a series of questions. And sort of asking them to form what we would call an I statement. So they form an I statement in their comp class, and they form an I statement in their methods class, and they play with those for an entire semester, redrafting, reworking, redrafting, reworking. And they sort of arrive at the end of the semester with something. And then the next process is sort of standing back from that and going, oh, so what is my paradigmatic view? What are my assumptions? Who else has these values? Who wouldn't agree with that in the world? Who does agree with that in the world? And it really takes them right into their research project, where they start connecting to literature and conduct reviews of literature, and they, which includes, looking at choreographers and choreographers' work in some cases. Artists' work is a type of review of literature. Starting to really stand back from that. And then they move into their third semester is when we actually have a concert, a dance concert, a student choreographed concert here. For this fall, there's 13 different choreographers who've made pieces for the concert. So in their third semester, they have an opportunity now to really synthesize everything that they've taken their I statement and they've connected it to the larger world. They've sat back and really thought about that, and now they've constructed something that they want to bring onto the stage that reflects that process. And so we do tend in our concert to get, pieces that are very, very personal and very, since we, very reflective of what young men and young women are experiencing and feeling and thinking about.